Great lineup for you. So hope everyone's design week is going well. Mine's been jam-packed with fun stuff. My name is Camille. I'm going to be your moderator. And we've got 4 lovely panelists here today. They each work at B2B companies. And they're going to talk a little bit about their team, the challenges and opportunities that they face in the design space. And we'll get to know them a little bit. So let's kick it off with some questions for the audience so we can get to know you better first. So start by raising your hand if you consider yourself a designer. That's pretty much everybody. Cool. Okay. Now raise your hand if you work for a B2B company. Wow, solid. Okay, also pretty much everybody. And now raise your hand if you are on Team Laurel. Okay, raise your hand if you're on Team Yanny. Okay, all right. If you don't get that reference, you can look it up. Okay, so now that we know our audience really well, let's meet our panelists. So we'll go down the line, and everyone can start with your name and then tell us a little bit about your design journey in the past, the present, and the future. So you could talk about previous roles, talk about your current role at your company, what your company does, and then would love to hear what you would like to be doing in 5 years. Sara, kick us off.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sara VanSlyke. I work at Atlassian. Previously, I've got my whole team here in the front row. It's very nice, very comforting. Previously, I was at a small boutique branding firm here in San Francisco, which was really nice. I was there for a couple years, very different from what I'm doing now. And previous to that, I was a student at California College of the Arts. Any CCA people? Woo! And yeah, so I work at Atlassian now. I'm a brand designer there. Atlassian is a software company. We make tools that help teams collaborate together. You might know Jira or Confluence. We also make Stride. We recently acquired Trello, so quite a large portfolio. And yeah, lots of interesting challenges that we face there.
What would you like to be doing in 5 years?
Oh, sorry. So in 5 years, I would love to be doing maybe more strategy work and art direction, most likely. Yeah, I kind of love growing our design team. It's really interesting to me, so something around there, probably.
Cool. Hi, guys. My name is Berenice Mendez, and I'm a communications designer at HelloSign. I'm born and raised in Mexico, in the border area of El Paso and Juarez. And I worked previously at HelloSign. I worked also in a small boutique advertising and branding agency. Also really, really fun, but also very different to what we do now. And previously to that, I also worked in a couple of magazines in the area, and previous to that, I was a student at the University of Texas at El Paso, where I graduated with both a painting degree and a graphic design degree. So I'm also like a low-key painter. Right now, I'm a senior communications designer at HelloSign, and I've been there for like 3.5 years. HelloSign is also a software company. We make software that empowers businesses to do like agreements and transactions. We have HelloFax, we have HelloSign, and we have our newest product, HelloWorks, which deals with larger workflows. I think that in 5 years, I'd love to also be doing mentorship for younger designers and art direction as well. Hopefully I'll have a second dog. Very important. And yeah, just kind of keep doing things that are fun and that are contributing to the design community.
Cool. Hi, I'm Steve Lewis, and I work at Chartio, which is a data analytics company, a business analytics tool. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, like the Pittsburgh area. I went to school for like graphic design, and I got a minor in printmaking, so more traditional print stuff. Yep. And somewhere in there, I took a web design class because the internet seemed like a big deal. And then I eventually moved. I worked for a couple like sign shops and a penny saver, which was interesting. And then I eventually moved to Pittsburgh and worked for a really small startup, kind of just making logos and brands work with one other guy. And we shared an office space with a couple other startups. So that was kind of my intro to the startup life, and he showed me a lot of like front-end code stuff and design, just kind of like how to build websites, like modern websites, not just like the really intro to HTML stuff I had done in college. So that was a really big kind of turning point and showed me a whole new world of stuff. And then we eventually kind of teamed up with some other companies in the same office space. We came out to SF and did a hackathon, and we won with this little tool called WYSIWYG. Eventually that led to a YC company that changed its name a bunch of times, pivoted a bunch of times, did a bunch of stuff. But we actually used Chartio as our kind of demo website at one point for the hackathon. So we kind of had gotten in touch with them and had this little relationship. So a couple of years later when I was looking for another job, they seemed like a really cool spot. They had an opening, and I already kind of had a connection there. So it was great. And I've been there for about over 4 years now. And yeah, it's been pretty great. We work with all kinds of companies of all kinds of sizes, and we give them kind of a tool to make charts and make dashboards and really dig into their data and share it out with their company and open it up to everyone. So I think that covers. Oh, the 5 years. So because I kind of come from a more traditional like print background, and I do a lot of like product stuff nowadays, I think I would really like to keep finding opportunities that blend those two. I think it's really fascinating, like looking at user behavior and doing research and split tests and that kind of stuff. But I'm still a very visual person, so hopefully can still have those together.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Derick, and I lead the communication design team here at AppDirect. So we make a bunch of products which help companies sell software to other companies. It's kind of complex, but that's kind of my high-level view of it. My background was in agency work. I worked in branding agencies in Scotland and New York before moving to San Francisco to work for AppDirect. It's been great to sort of come in as a designer and get my hands dirty, and then sort of move into more of the management side of things. And 5 years from now, I'm not really sure what I'm doing next week, but I think I'd still like to be working in this space. I think trying to get out from the day-to-day tasks and have more kind of oversight, more long strategic thinking is my big goal.
Awesome, thanks guys. Really impressive resumes over here.
I also just noticed you guys have AppDirect coasters.
Yes, we do.
So cool.
Please do not. They're not freebies. So before we dig into the questions, I'll introduce myself really quickly. Once again, I'm Camille Matonis. I study design at the School of YouTube Tutorials, and I, about a year ago, entered the B2B design space when I joined AppDirect, and I've had the pleasure of working on Derick's team, which is the communications design team, and I actually am transitioning on Monday to the UX team, so I'm very cross-functional right now, and what else? In 5 years, I really would love to be living in New Zealand, working as a freelance designer, and have exactly 5 goats and 11 sheep. So that's the goal.
It's so much better than all of ours.
The dream. And I can't forget my most important credential, which is that I hear Yanni and Laurel at different times, and that makes me the perfect moderator. So, like I said just now, I'm pretty new to the B2B design space, so I have a lot of questions for you guys. Let's start by expanding on the definition of B2B design and talk about what sets it apart. How is it different from B2C design? And what do you see as the most important difference between the two? And to mix it up, let's start with Derick.
Okay. I think that a lot of B2B software is traditionally sold based on a feature list rather than the experience of using it. I think that kind of sets it apart from a lot of consumer products. And the people who are typically buying it aren't necessarily the people who are using it. So I think as a designer, there's a big difference in actually having to fight for the experience of using it or how you sell that. I think the other difference I've seen in like coming from more consumer type projects is really how much you have to support a sales function, whether that's a sales team or building, you know, a website which actually converts to sales. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, and maybe it's a little obvious because it's kind of in the name, like, but when you're selling to a business, you're kind of selling to a group of people, whereas when you're selling to a consumer, usually it's a consumer at a time. So like to me, there's kind of a difference between making an ad that really resonates with like one person and kind of trying to sell to a whole company. And a lot of times it is kind of like it's like a longer sell, right? Like it's not just like, hey, sign up, just buy something real quick. It's, you know, you really have to build this relationship and kind of get a demo going and really kind of show, kind of almost get to know them. And yeah, I think a lot of times we can, because the customers are a lot more valuable, you spend a lot more time trying to get them. So, you know, yeah, I think, like, obviously Facebook isn't calling up people, like, personally trying to get them to sign up. I mean, maybe with a bot someday, but, yeah.
I think personally for my space, which is, you know, like e-signatures and agreements in the 21st century, security is a huge part of like B2B software, and having that as kind of the pillar of what your product is something that drives conversations with your prospects and your clients and your users, and it really drives a lot of the content that we have. So that's definitely something that sets it apart from like maybe selling shoes or selling something more directly to consumers. Other than that, also being the sales cycle being so much longer than everything that happens in that space, design touches. Is it collateral? Is it user education? Is it ads? Is it just plain brand awareness? It's everything that happens between the first contact and when they finally sign the contract, which is like always exciting to touch.
Yeah, I would second almost all of that. Yeah, for Atlassian at least, we are definitely serving a whole bunch of different audiences, from the people that actually buy our products and the people that are managing them, who are admins of the products, to the people that have to use it whether they like it or not at the end of the day. And all those people have very different motivations. And in addition to that, we're also managing a whole bunch of different relationships, I think, too. So obviously we're managing a relationship to the people that we sell to, but we're also managing a relationship to a whole ecosystem of partners and vendors who add on to our products and build tools for our products, and they're kind of representing their own brand, and they're representing our brand too, so we have to make sure that we're kind of giving them, packaging up everything that we have and giving it to them so that they can sell that. And I find that that's one of the biggest challenges that maybe you don't see quite as much in the consumer space.
Really great answers, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks. So
Not to my own.
you really know your stuff. So let's talk about complexity. Products used by enterprises are typically more complex than consumer products. Sara and Derick, specifically at Atlassian and AppDirect, you have a pretty complex suite of products, and they can be used in different combinations by different customers. How do you design for these challenges without making compromises?
Go for it.
Okay. So at Atlassian, at least, we're about 16 years old, so not exactly a spring chicken and not exactly a dinosaur of a company, so somewhere in the middle-aged. And when we first started out, we were very much in the developer space, so we kind of had one main audience that we catered to, and we really kind of created these archetypes about them and had a lot of like really strong beliefs about what they cared about and what they did. And as we got bigger and bigger and expanded our toolkit, we needed to kind of break those assumptions and start thinking about everybody. And that kind of required us to start making trade-offs about who we cater to. It wasn't just about this single group anymore. It was about literally any team and how they might go about using our products. So for us, at least in our product design, I think that they struggle with this a little bit more than marketing. We really have to kind of make compromises and say, like, okay, we're not just going after these people, these developers anymore who supposedly like gaming and nerdy things, and that's a huge assumption. Yeah, and sort of just opening our eyes, talking to our customers more, and yeah, allowing them to sort of be more than just what we've decided they were 16 years ago.
Could you give an example of how you've redefined your customer?
Yeah, so I think for Jira at least, we've really stopped thinking about that as just a software customer necessarily. In fact, we sort of split Jira into 3 different products that could, because it's extremely customizable, you can really make it do whatever you want it to do. So we ended up splitting it into Jira Core, which is sort of like a lightweight way to use Jira, Jira Service Desk, which is kind of more for an IT crowd, and Jira Software. This is turning into a really boring sales pitch, but basically we got a lot less precious about what our products were and kind of allowed them to sort of take the shape that we saw people using them, for example.
I definitely agree with a lot of the challenges you talked about. I think for us, we kind of grew quite quickly from having one core product to a whole bunch of products, and some of those were developed in-house, some of those were through acquisitions, so it was a real like mixed bag of things, and we had to make that decision like strategically. Are we going to have like one strong parent brand that everything kind of rolls up to and relates to, or do we give them all like really individual identities that they can all like stand alone with? And for us, we made the decision which was to roll up to this parent brand. That was the one that already had the strongest voice, and it made sense that those things all kind of related. But that's an ongoing challenge, because when you do have like a bunch of products and you try to balance that, giving them a voice but giving them a relationship, it's a really difficult thing to manage. And I think for me personally, like I always am trying to stay on top of that and think, does this continue to make sense? Do we continue to like follow this path, or do we actually make a stand at this point and say maybe we need to change things? So it's a shift in landscape, definitely.
Awesome. So in my experience, I've found that B2B products are often labeled by designers as being kind of unsexy. They're a little more serious than consumer-facing products. And I'm curious if you guys have found that to be true. Berenice?
Well, I think that if they weren't boring, we wouldn't have all jumped into wanting to change them, right? I feel like everyone here has a drive to change what's like that stereotype of that very stale, corporate, boring, very dry and difficult product. So yeah, it is, I mean, because we live in the Bay and we have access to these amazing companies that are driving innovation, and so we don't see really what's out there, and what's out there is still like the landscape's still a little bit rough, but it's changing, and I think it is driven out of empathy and wanting to provide real value and being very transparent with what the product that you have can offer. But yeah, I mean, it is true, but I think that the next generation of designers are changing that.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point, because to me, I don't think of like the unsexy companies as being the enterprise ones anymore, as just so much like the older ones, right? Like I think the new generation of companies, like, you know, like Facebook is proving that like you can have like nice sleek design, or even like I think Apple really started the ball rolling in a way, like showing that like design was important and that you could still make like mad money while having that be a core. If anything, like it helps, right? It helps you actually make a better product, and I think the newer companies are really proving that. So, yeah.
Is that a challenge for you guys to keep things, you know, fun and not let it be boring, Berenice, like you're saying? And how do you do that? Are there anything specifically that you work on?
Yeah. Well, channel is everything, I think. I mean, there is a certain, I mean, because of the space we are, there are legality and security things that have to be said in a certain way and looked a certain way because they need to be available and clear. But I mean, I'll give you an example. When we launched our product HelloWorks, we actually also, a few months later, we launched this social media campaign. It was called the 1993 campaign. And it was really fun because HelloWorks essentially is trying to phase out like I guess just signing a PDF and having to email it or anything, but everything, all sorts of forms that make up workflows are combined into a very mobile-friendly form-like flow. So PDFs were invented in 1993, which is kind of a weird thing that we're using still something from the 90s on a daily basis. So what we did was actually grab technology from the 90s and kind of call them out and said like, hey, your Nintendo is calling wants its PDF back kind of thing. And just kind of like, it was really fun, and we're definitely, I mean, we were doing it in social media, we're also calling awareness to this problem, and that is like, how is technology moving so quickly and certain aspects of technology aren't. So that was one example of like, kind of like finding a good channel to be experimental and like throw things, you know, a little bit off the curve and try to like, you know, experiment. So it's about picking the right channel and kind of like not being afraid of speaking the truth of your company. Yeah.
Yeah, I think designers have always been fun and creative, and now it's just companies are trusting to like let that be part of the message.
I like that. That's really true. Also love the campaign. I really need to look that one up. So let's talk about research and testing. So with the B2B product, it's especially difficult to test out your designs. So I'm curious how you guys get external feedback on your work, and what kind of research and testing practices each of your teams use. Anyone want to take that one?
We use user testing, like .com. We also do like traditional user testing where we, you know, just have people come in, obviously. And actually, like, we even just amongst our teams, like, can kind of just look at like a different team and see how they're using it. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias to look out for there, but you know, we even just across teams use our own product in a pretty different way. So, but yeah, I mean, really, and also like your traditional like split testing kind of things. I mean, I think these are all tools that we can use even in B2B companies, for sure.
So when you talk about using your own product, like dog fooding it, are there any issues with that? Do you have any challenges that arise?
I think the biggest thing is the bias that I just mentioned, you know, just making sure that you're not like losing the forest through the trees, or however that expression works. Yeah, it's nice because, like I said, you can go and see how somebody else is using it and kind of even like just look at yourself and see what you need. But yeah, it's definitely, you got to be careful that you're not just making what you want and what your team wants and needs, or letting that be the most important user, right? That's probably the biggest challenge, I think, for sure. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it's definitely the biggest. Yeah.
I can add to that and say that I think research is something that we could do a lot better on. I think it's sort of taken for a given on the product side a lot, but on the marketing side, we don't often follow through on that enough. One thing that we do is kind of live testing almost with our digital ads. So we put out a lot of ads on mediums like LinkedIn, and Camille knows this because she works on it, but you know, we're constantly monitoring those stats and like changing things almost on like a week-to-week basis and learning a lot as we go. So that's actually one of the best ways we get feedback.
Yeah, a lot of like email campaign tools are pretty, you can send out different emails to different people. Like just today that happened where we sent out different emails to different people, and you know, that's a pretty easy way, especially in like marketing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, with our digital ads, it's been really cool to see like how detailed you can get with A/B testing, for sure, down to the CTA color, and yeah. What else? What other tools do you guys use other than usertesting.com?
Well, I mean, sometimes we just getting into like back into like wanting to experiment. We do maybe test for specific things on landing pages, for example. There's a very interesting, actually, one that we're working on, but half of the team said, hey, no, the photorealistic image is gonna tell a better story. Half of the team is like, no, the illustration is a little bit more metaphorical, but it's actually like it just captures more. So we're doing that. We're like actually sending them both into the wild, and we're gonna test that.
You gotta put bets on it too.
Exactly, yeah. Yanni or Laurel, which one is it?
You gotta get Monopoly money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very interesting because out of these practices, you are armed with like tools that say, hey, data backs me up, and I'm not just wanting to release like you know, whimsical illustrations for no reason at all. Actually, on ads we do that as well, and for the longest time we're just doing like ads which is bold text, and we're trying to not do a lot of illustrations. But then the data came back, and actually one of our best performing ads had an illustration, and it was not a photo, and it was not just text. So it made an impression. So that just tells us that the space wants to change, and people are clicking on these things because it's actually telling stories, telling something that's happening to them. So yeah, we do that. We And so, sometimes it's hard to get into the nitty-gritty of like stats and like what they mean. So the way that I do it with my campaigns manager is like, hey, okay, we're gonna release all of these ads, or like let's do these landing pages, and because you are the one who's the expert on the data, give me a very simplified status, like give me a thumbs up emoji if it's performing really well, give me a kind of like, if it's kind of doing fine, or give me a thumbs up, and then we'll change it immediately. But that allows you to be involved in those decisions, and without having to do like a super crash course of how to read this thing. So it allows for everyone to kind of focus on what they're good at, but everyone be collaborating and making this kind of decisions.
I really love that thumbs up
Yeah.
to everyone.
Like,
Um,
hearts out there.
Let's talk about stakeholder presentations and how they're different at B2B companies versus agencies. We have a lot of agency experience on this panel, so both comparing to agencies and also B2C or any other companies you guys have worked at. And if you can call out any specific tactics that you've used to help with presenting to stakeholders, we'd love to hear it, because that's definitely challenging for a lot of designers.
Yeah, we are constantly presenting at Atlassian. I think one of the biggest differences between the agency work and in-house work is that in-house it's so much more collaborative, in my opinion at least. Like, you're dealing with, your clients are the people that have like a real legitimate stake in the project that you're working with, as opposed to just kind of like the middle manager or the head person. And what's really nice about that is they bring a whole different set of contexts to the projects that you might not get otherwise. So you end up building a relationship that is so much more than just kind of tossing information back over the fence to one another. And they bring a real, strategic expertise, and you bring an expertise, and I think that a lot more comes of it, and a lot of respect is kind of grown out of that as well. So some of the tactics that we use, we definitely rely on testing a lot to kind of sell in our ideas. But one of my favorite processes is mood boarding, which is to just help people who aren't super visual thinkers to really sit down with imagery, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time, because you're mostly just like swiping stuff off the internet, which is also problematic in its own right sometimes. But getting stuff in front of people and getting people to start talking about what they're reacting to and why, and start speaking the same language. And I think that sort of hands-on collaboration is something that you don't get quite as much outside of an in-house experience, which is cool.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences I saw, or one of the biggest takeaways I had from agency life was that you actually need to almost make a project of the presentation itself. I think sometimes in-house you kind of take it for granted that people already are up to speed with a project, and you can just finish the work and then walk into their office and show them it. But if you finish a couple of days ahead of time and actually take time to think about what you want to say, craft a kind of narrative around it, and pace out like all those slides that you want to show, it makes such a big difference, because you're giving them much more context and you can help to like sway that decision. I think for our team, we present directly to people in the leadership team quite a lot. I think I just saw one of our CEOs walk out, so I think it's safe to talk about him. But we present to them directly, and I think to some extent, one of the biggest strengths presenting in-house is that you know the people you're presenting to, but it's also one of the biggest weaknesses, because you know them, so you can sort of like get ahead of the kind of questions they might ask, like the things which they might be expecting. But sometimes you find yourself in that situation where you're almost designing for what you know they'll approve, as opposed to what is actually right for the project. So you need to be able to take a step back and check yourself on that sometimes. So.
Yeah, I find for me like the biggest thing is the goal. Like anytime I go into a presentation or a meeting or something, it's kind of like you start off by saying, okay, here's the goal, this is what we're trying to decide, this is what we're trying to get feedback on, this is like what this is about, so that there's a very clear like, this is the thing. And I've seen that work like even not on design teams, just any team. It's just really good to start a meeting by saying, okay, let's all get on the same page and start on the same page, and then if we get derailed, we can come back to that same page. But in design things, I also find like context is super helpful, right? Like, okay, this is the goal, and then kind of setting up, this is like, kind of painting the picture, right? Explaining like, this is the story, or like, say you have the data to back it up, I find it's nice to sort of have like a theory that you proved right with that data, rather than just like, well, we threw a bunch of colors and this is the one that did the best. I don't know why, it's just the one that worked. Whereas saying, okay, so we thought that people didn't understand what it was about, so we sent them to this page that explains it, and then we saw a conversion increase, right? So like, there's a theory we had, we heard feedback, we did something to address it, and then saw a difference. So like, yeah.
One of the biggest differences between presenting an agency and like an in-house team, especially for like software, is that if you get more comfortable showing work in progress. I think that back in the agency, like things had to be very buttoned up, and you rehearse every single part of the presentation. And at least at HelloSign, we do pre-presentations, and by the time the final presentation, everyone's already kind of seen it, and it's just about like talking about maybe like other considerations, like small details here and there. But when you get comfortable sharing work that is not it's not ready, but you have a lot of questions ready to ask, and because that's like the nature of like the tech industry. There's a lot of collaborations, a lot of like departments with different expertises. When you show your work and you actually, exactly that, you ask for specific feedback and you want to kind of trust our expertise, you're going to get very juicy like stuff that you can actually put into the design and it actually impacting. So I would say, just like you said, is like be prepared to set some boundaries and like, hey, this is what I'm looking for feedback on. This is already covered by the goals, and we already decide on this, but this is where we actually want everyone to kind of give feedback on. And that's also something that's very refreshing, that not have that pressure of like having it perfectly ready, because this is people who care so much for the evolution of the product as much as you do.
Yeah, I think like at an agency, you kind of present everything at once, whereas here you're kind of like, okay, we're just looking at this one piece. Like, we just got to talk about, don't get off track, this one.
It's going to change.
Yeah,
It's not one thing. Yeah.
A lot of times, yeah. Anything else?
But I do find that, at least in-house, anybody who I'm collaborating with on a project is also, at least at Atlassian, like they're also constantly trying to put themselves into the user's position and constantly trying to have empathy and kind of get outside of their own heads, which is really nice. I think that kind of helps weed out a lot of subjectiveness a lot of times, and I don't find myself having as many conversations of like, okay, well, you don't like purple,
Yes.
so.
Is there anything you do to like specifically do that, or is it just kind of like an active, okay, let's try to get in the user head? I mean, is there like...
Yeah, well, like for instance, going back to the testing question a little bit, we've occasionally done card sorting technique. So before we kind of start on a project, we'll define a couple like words. So instead of like digging into the details of like a texture or a color or something that can be really like easily subjective, we'll dig into a couple like principle level things that we're all agreeing upon. And then we'll use user testing, or we'll use the card sorting method to sort of get outside opinions on, is this hitting on those things that we said we wanted to hit? Is it, for instance, we're always trying to be bold, optimistic, and practical. That's our company personality traits. So we'll get some outside opinion and test these things that are really hard to test because they're sort of based on like a gut feeling or appeal. And yeah, if we do that enough, and if we're kind of consistent about that, we'll find that over time people will just be in the habit of not just listening to their first gut instinct about something all the time, which is really nice.
I think asking a lot of questions as well, like
Yeah.
the example of someone says, I don't like purple, asking why, or
Yeah.
do you think the user will also feel that way? And, if you can get them to second
Why
guess
is
themselves.
pretty great, yeah.
User journey, user personas are coming in handy in those situations, because then it's like, it's not about you, it's about Mary, who's signing contracts every day and does not care that much about purple.
Yeah, I found the journey, or like the journey, like you said, or the context, sort of, it's like more than a persona, right? It's more than just like, this is the person and this is kind of what they're like. It's maybe not, I mean, I think for more complex things, it's a real long journey, but sometimes it's just like, this is the situation that they're in. So,
What are they
yeah, for
looking
sure.
at all day long?
Yeah, yeah, like, yeah, exactly. And like, what is it they're doing right now, that kind of thing, yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So for the next question, just preface it with a quick audience poll. So who here works in the marketing or communications department at your company? All right, cool. Who
That's
here
more like 50-50, that was a good one.
works in product or is a UX designer?
There it is.
Awesome.
There it is.
Okay, who here does both? Okay, sweet. All right, wow. We're pretty even split here.
Yeah, that was good.
I'm also curious, who here is looking for a job? Sweet, all right, everyone here is hiring, so approach them later. All right, so that leads us to the next question, which is that this panel is centered on visual design, but we all know that brand extends beyond visual to product and crosses those kinds of, company-created boundaries. So I'm curious how you guys collaborate with the product teams at your company and how you maintain brand consistency from visual to product and vice versa.
I'm actually really interested in what you have to
Oh,
say.
sure.
Because I love to know.
Yeah, so it's been a really long journey, I can tell you that much. When I started at Atlassian about 4 years ago, brand didn't really exist as a term. And we had marketing design, which was about 4 to 5 people. And then we had product design, which was pushing about 100 people. And those two groups did not talk to each other basically at all. I think we had one hip chat room, but I definitely know I never said anything in it. And but from the beginning, I think both teams were sort of on a mission to kind of change or create a design culture at Atlassian, because it didn't really exist for the most part. It was an extremely engineering-led company from the very beginning, and I think we shared a common goal of wanting to just make design a thing at Atlassian. So we had some common ground there off the bat. And something that I think we all realized early on was that the brand experience for 90% of our customers happened in the product, because our end users weren't the ones going to the website or to check out the product or evaluate the product or download the product or buy the product. They were basically coming in day one at their jobs and like being told like, and here's your Jira login. So the brand was happening in the product for them, and we kind of acknowledged that within the first couple of years that I was there, and we made a huge effort, especially during our rebrand, to come to an agreement on almost all the foundational elements of the brand. So things like the color palette, like I mentioned, we have those sort of brand personality pillars that were really important to us, and we really sat down and defined, what does bold look like? What does optimistic look like? Is it like graffiti? It's not graffiti, spoiler alert. So we really came to an agreement on that stuff. We came to an agreement on like our primary colors and how they were used, in what ratio, things like that. And illustration style as well was really important to make sure that it was flexible enough to kind of talk about really kind of metaphorical, aspirational stories of teamwork, but also be able to drill really down into details about things like permissions when it needed to show up in product, and talk about really literal things. So that's how we have come together in the past couple of years, and I'll say that on a day-to-day basis, the maintenance is definitely there. We've put money and people into the positions that we need to be talking to each other on a regular basis, and there's actual relationships forming between humans. So I think that's really the main key there.
I think that has to come from the designers as well. They have to be proactive with that and lead the charge, because the product team are working most often with like the engineers and PMs, and on our side we're working most closely with marketers and salespeople, and they have much different priorities. They're not asking us to make sure that the two look completely compatible, so that's down to us to have those conversations and be the voice for that.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. We're trying to talk to our potential users, and if marketing and communications design is using, say, illustration as a metaphor how the product works. We gotta make sure that that's how the product works. So if you don't know how your products work and you don't understand the challenges that the product is facing, how it's evolving, then you're not telling the right stories to your potential customers and your audiences. So we try to deliver the best. This should be pretty universal. So with that in mind, we can just learn from each other and trying to have that empathy and communicate that.
Yeah, on our team, design is very small, so we're very closely linked. And yeah,
How many people do you have on your design team?
2. Me being one of them.
Same.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's very closely linked, and I mean, I think we learn a lot and lean a lot like on the product team to know like. How are people using it and how can we try to sell it to new people, right? Like, so on the marketing side, we use that information a little bit. And I mean, the whole thing is the product and is the experience too, right? So I mean, even though we kind of hand it off to the product team, that line's pretty fuzzy, right? Like, and I think kind of one thing that I have found helpful, at least, is pretty early on, like more or less day one at Chartio, I was going through and I kind of made the decision that we look to like Edward Tufte a lot for our data visualization principles, and one of his biggest things is kind of just clarity and letting the data speak and kind of be the most important thing and nothing else getting in the way of that. And so kind of choosing a theme like that, and in my head it almost comes down to just the word clarity, and that is kind of what the Chartio brand is, and kind of no matter what we do to that, as long as it kind of comes back to that and we're making things clear and we're making the data clear, then I feel like it's living up to that core like ethos. So that's kind of, I've found helpful even like across the product or anywhere that, any team that we're making a decision, it's like, well, what's the clearest? And it's specifically what's the clearest for the end user, but just what's clearest,
So
That might not always work at every company, but I think having that kind of core value, and it kind of goes to the, like, write your words, your 3 words. I could probably come up with 2 more, but yeah.
I wish I only had just one to work with.
Well, I think we actually there was 3 others that our leadership team kind of came up with that I do go back to and refer to a lot too, as my kind of secondary. But that's also a little more for product stuff. But.
Cool, I love that. Clarity, 1 word, easy, done. So in this tech-saturated environment, you guys have a lot of options, other companies you could bounce to, but you've all stayed at your companies for a relatively long time. Steve, you stayed at Chartio for 4.5 years.
It's true.
Sara, you've been at Atlassian for 4, Berenice for 3.5 at HelloSign, and Derick for just over 3 at AppDirect. So I'm curious how you guys have managed to stay engaged for so long, and how your roles evolved, and just we're running out of time, so if we can all try to be brief, that would be awesome.
Evolution is a cool word. I've enjoyed being able to see like that decision that I made at the beginning about clarity and see how that ripples and the butterfly effect of that choice. I think that's been really cool, and being able to see that on like a really long term has been pretty cool. That's not a challenge, it's something I enjoy about it, but I guess it's something engaging. I think at tech companies a lot you can move around on teams. That's pretty common too, I would assume. Yeah. Try to keep it quick.
In my case, I think it's just the freedom to like own and like propose projects that you think are very important, and making design such a, having us sit at the table really. I've been meeting with executives as much as we are with like salespeople, and they value design a lot, so it's at the center of the conversation. And yeah, just pretty much like the space is changing. If I didn't believe that e-signatures or like agreements have a lot of potential to like improve organizations, I wouldn't be here. But I do believe that I can help connect people with software that they might be using 8 hours a day and it won't suck. So that's kind of the motivation too, and having that kind of like freedom to experiment and kind of go off what the rules say a little bit.
Yeah, freedom's a huge one for me too. I think Atlassian's like such a bottoms-up company. Like there's almost no top-down directives in a lot of ways sometimes. So you really get to steer the ship, which is amazing. And I feel like as you build trust with people. Like, just doors just keep opening in so many directions, and there's so many like hairy problems to solve. And I think I'm a person who loves complexity and loves to like really get in there and clean up cruft. So, and there's lots of cruft to clean up, so that's what's keeping me around.
I think for me that working just in-house, you have to live with the consequences of what you do. So you're actually trying to solve problems which will have an impact directly on you, not your customer. And I love like being part of a brand where I get to build that brand and then see the results of it and then reap the rewards of that. So I think that's really rewarding.
Awesome. So let's zoom out again to the B2B space and talk about the past couple years of this space evolving and where you see it going in the future, what trends you see staying relevant. So we're just going to kind of cover where we've been and where we're going, and you can speak to whatever you want to.
One thing that I kind of find interesting is like intercom and that idea of kind of having this little chat thing and trying to like engage with the customer in a more kind of like conversational way right away. There's actually a company called Drift that has a pretty interesting tagline. I'm going to paraphrase it. It's something along the lines of like start conversations instead of filling out forms, or forms instead of conversations, something like that. But the idea is you don't just sign up a form and give you ask the person, what's your email, what's your name, what are you trying to do, why do you want this product, and there's some tools that have like where you kind of get started almost before you give them your email, right? You choose a theme, you put in some text, you add a picture and stuff before they really start asking for things. So I think that more kind of human, like you're walking into a store approach. And again, the bots will do it for us soon, so.
Yeah, that trend of like acknowledging not only like the human that's using the product at the end of the day, but I think there's also a trend of sort of acknowledging the humans that build the product too. Like we're trying to make our software sound more human and more friendly and approachable. And I think that just speaks to a larger trend, which is just that we need to start acknowledging people, even when they're in the workplace, that that they want to bring their full selves to work, and they want to kind of have a work-life blend as opposed to...
And they're still people.
Yeah, and they're still people, and they're passionate about what they do. They're not just trying to like check boxes and go home at the end of the day. So I think that's really exciting, and it's giving us the opportunity to start borrowing from consumer trends quite a bit, but I think that pretty soon, once we've sort of caught up to that, we're going to lead a little bit more, and I'm very curious to see what the enterprise space does with that in the future.
Yeah, just like you said, I mean, more organizations are becoming more like bottoms up, so that means that the person that might be pitching your software doesn't have to be a CTO or a CEO. It can be someone in sales who actually just ran into it. That's why we have the liberty and the freedom to talk to so many levels and so many like the breadth of like the audience is huge. We actually at HelloSign we just put together a program called Digital Strength. It's for digital transformation, and we're trying to enable people to get a little more technologically savvy, and if you see that there's a process that's broken in your organization that technology can solve, how to lead kind of like a revolution in your own office, and advocate for these solutions that can make everyone's job a little bit easier. So yes, that is something that was probably not happening like 5-10 years ago, and it just allows for a huge opportunity for us to talk to multiple people, and all of them, like you said, human.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's just people having bigger voices within their companies. I think like everyone through social media has the opportunity to speak about anything, and people are going to complain about things that suck and companies that suck, and so they need to listen to people more, and so we need to focus more on those experiences.
And I wouldn't be surprised if those things all started to come together a little too more. Like if you called up a company and they said, "Hey, we noticed you tweeted a month ago," and yeah, that'll all be collected.
Fantastic. Okay, so time for Q&A. Hope you guys have some questions ready. I can come bring the mic to you. You ready?
Excellent.
Or you can speak up.
Okay. Either way. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christine, and I have a question for Sarah. I work at a company where marketing design and product design are very full-fleshed out organizations, and we don't talk to each other at all. I'm curious about if you have any tips for like first or second steps, because I do feel like we should be talking, but I'm not even sure what I would propose exactly.
Yeah, so we do something that's on a very large scale, but I think it could be really reduced down into some kind of scrappy, testable format. And what we do is it's called Design Week, not to be confused with Design Week. But once a year, all of the designers come together in Sydney, where we were founded, which where our main headquarters is. So all the designers fly out to Sydney, and essentially we just share kind of what are the biggest challenges that we had that year, what are we most excited about. We put together like a little reel of like our greatest hits from the year. And it's really just a time that we set aside to learn from each other and kind of celebrate and commiserate and whatever it is, and just build empathy with one another. And that, I think, is one of the biggest things that sort of helps us get a peek into each other's world and sort of starts opening up those lines of connection. So I would encourage you to, even if it's just like a monthly, hour-long meeting, to do something where, one person from each side sort of shares what they're doing or what they're working on. That could be a great start. I think also even just like a bit of a blogging culture or something. I don't know if you use a tool that to help disseminate information out, but writing up your projects, how they went, the tough spots, things like that, and just helping people get a view into your head and your process, I think is huge.
Step one, go to Sydney.
Yeah, go to Sydney, get on a plane.
No, but actually I found just kind of like recurring, like setting a time, just saying we're gonna do it is like the best way. Like whether it's like monthly is probably good, right? Just like monthly, all the designers get together and talk. Just set a date, do it, and then make it a recurring thing, because otherwise you'll come up with excuses not to do it, right?
Yeah, you can involve beer if you need to.
Good way to get
Or cake.
started.
Do you have any other questions?
Yeah. So if we go back to the research topic, and it can, at least so in my company, we're finding it challenging to say, okay, where do we decide to really focus on like personas and individuals? You guys talked a little bit about this, and you guys focus on the tooling, but versus that sliding spectrum between prioritizing personas, if you can get them, versus roles, and it's enterprise. And then like I've done a bit of internet research on this, and they're like, well, yes, roles sometimes, but so just how do you divide that up? Like how do you divide and conquer when you're trying to decide who are we actually designing for?
What is it you want to divide?
So like if your product is being used among different countries and different companies that are actually within these different industries and different team sizes, different team diversity, all sorts of stuff. So like you can divide it across all these different frameworks. So if you were to say, okay, we're going to pick some personas and just go based off of that, which is more of a typical user-centered design process, versus a really typical enterprise process would be like, we're just going to go based off of roles. If you go based off of roles, it's maybe kind of jamming a tool in front of them based off of what they're trying to do, versus going more towards user-centered design that's maybe geared towards consumers, and you're really trying to make it sticky. So that kind of sliding perspective between making it sticky for the individual user versus the role or the hat they've got. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So like, the ultimate question is, are there any research methods that you have found, not necessarily tools, but methods that really help you identify who you're designing for?
Scatter plots. No, actually, it's a pretty good way of putting like two things on an axis and kind of finding patterns and trends. No, but I mean, I kind of feel like roles and personas is kind of just like a syntax thing. Maybe, like, I'm not quite sure I understand the total difference there. I mean, it kind of sounds like you're just kind of naming the group of people who are using it, right? Like.
I guess, yeah. I mean, depending on how much time you have, but.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess what I mean by scatter plots, right, is generally like we try to just like look at people and like see all the different ways that they're using it and try to see like some similarities. things and like look for common things that happen, right? It's like kind of like little clusters and groups, and then we can kind of call that whatever we call it, and whether there's like a role or a thing that aligns to. But it's kind of like a use case or like a journey. A lot of times I think it adds a better context than just saying like, well, you're the marketing person, so clearly you care about these things. Rather we're trying to say, okay, let's say this person is coming in and they're trying to assess, their email campaign and they want to know how it went, so they're looking for these metrics, and this is kind of like the mindset that they're in, trying to set up that scenario, I guess. Anybody else can jump in and add to this?
Okay, so I'm so sorry, guys. We can follow up with more Q&A after. We're going to be hanging out, but I don't want to keep anyone stuck here if you need to leave. So we'll just finish up with one last question for everyone, and you can choose between a fun fact question or a really brief takeaway from the night and like the one thing you want the audience to leave here thinking about. So if your thing gets taken, you can ask me for your fun question that was supposed to come earlier, but we didn't have time to do it. So it's up to you. Roll the dice. Derick, you're starting us off. You'll take the fun question. Okay. We got a silly question for Derick. Derick, tell me about something that you love doing that you are terrible at doing.
Well, fun fact, before everyone turned up tonight, we were having a competition to see who could throw a balled up piece of paper into a trash can most, and turns out I'm really bad at that, but I enjoyed it. So.
It's very true.
It sucked.
I think I've said everything I need to say. You can give me a silly question, too.
Okay, your silly question is, what is your spirit, fruit, or vegetable? And why? Well, actually, don't do the why.
Blueberries.
Excellent.
I'll just share like a quick thought that I think that another opportunity that you have, being part of the brand team or the communications team at an enterprise is really being part of the culture, and that's something that I really enjoy at HelloSign. I not only deal with marketing campaigns and touch base with product, but I also tap into the culture, and we work with Pride Designs. We do things for internal events in the team, and that's super valuable because I think that's if we're making people happy at work, we're truly living the values that we're trying to put into our product. So yeah, it's always fun to step away from the computer and do something manual. And if you guys can do that in your organizations and be tech advocates to like take a step back and kind of get your hands dirty, that you're also doing a service for the design industry.
And I said blueberries.
Blueberries are great though.
Takeaway or silly question?
I'll do the silly one.
Okay. If you could have any animal as a pet, Sarah, what would it be and why?
That's really easy.
I already know this.
Let's go.
I think.
Really? I already mentioned it. That's embarrassing. Well, I'm definitely obsessed with dachshund dogs, the wiener dogs. Yes, the long, weird-looking ones. Yeah, that's just my dream. That's my 5-year plan. Acquire a whole herd of dachshund dogs, and then we've also talked about potentially getting like a border collie to kind of herd the herd. So that's on the table as well.
That's a beautiful image. Wow. Okay, great way to finish out the panel. Thank you, everyone. This was amazing. All right, thank you guys for coming, sharing your evening with us. There's more food and alcohol, so mingle, ask all the questions you didn't get to. And thanks so much.